There's a new street fighter on your windowsill. The weapon is peace, the word is chill.
Hello there, gang, and welcome to another episode of Displaying Model Behaviour. So take off your pants, crack a beer, and get ready for the world's dumbest action figure video podcast. Guys, it is the Clone Saga Part 2. I hope you enjoyed Part 1. I had a blast making it, and I was going to hold off on doing the second part, but I thought, you know what? I'm in the zone for Clone. I should be a battle rap person. Guys, before we do that, two extremely important pieces of business. First of all, you like this hat? This is my staple hat. It's a great hat. I love it with all my heart. But sometimes you gotta go a little extra special. And there's one guy out there who has helped me bring my hat game to the next level. Marvel Comics Crowns on Instagram. Oh my god. Look at these crowns, ladies and gentlemen. This is possibly the coolest thing I've ever seen. These are bespoke, handmade, custom Marvel Comics crowns, and I am just over the moon. So I have the awesome Spider-Man logo one here, and I've got the one with the Venom Miles head. I mean, talk about a custom-made crown just for me. Marvel Legend, comic book, Miles, Venom symbiote, custom crown. So you know what? Off with the Transformers and on with the custom crown. What do you think? So guys, big old thanks to Marvel Comics Crowns on Instagram. Go check him out, see what he does. He does amazing work. Oh, look at this smile. I'm absolutely made up. Go follow him on Instagram, hit him up for any bespoke options and ideas. The guy's all kinds of awesome, and he'll hook you up with something as great as this. The second piece of information is, you see that right there? That is the Wall of Fame plaque for Sword in the Storm. A long time, I was going to say fan, but I hate using the word fan, but a long time friend. That's an easy one. A long time friend of the show. Model Behaviour had its first quiz night last night. The Model Behaviour Marvel Pub Quiz. And Sword in the Storm is your pub quiz champion. I didn't know where I was going with that sentence. He is your reigning and defending pub quiz champ. And at the very bottom of the picture, it's a little picture of Dion, because Dion got second place. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to give a little recognition for Dion in second place. So Sword in the Storm, he's representing with the X-Men comic cover. He was like, that can be my avatar, my first ever comic. And Dion sent me a ridiculous picture of him, I think, owling somewhere. Is that what you call it? Owling or planking? No, owling was what they did in The Office. That is the second place. And until we have another pub quiz, that will remain there. Sword in the Storm, number one, reigning and defending pub quiz champion. And we'll probably do a pub quiz again very soon because I had a blast doing that. Right, that's all of the preamble out of the way. If you're still watching, then thank you, because it's time to tackle the Clone Saga. So when we last left off, maximum clonage was over. Peter Parker had been revealed as the clone all along, and Ben Reilly is the new Spider-Man. So considering that Mary Jane is pregnant, it's time for Peter Parker to finally hang up the webs. So he and MJ go off to Portland. Of all places, they go to Portland, Oregon to start a new life together, leaving Ben Reilly finally to become the one true Spider-Man for a while. So this brings us to the first Marvel Legend I ever bought. Ladies and gentlemen, my favorite Marvel Legend, Ben Reilly, holding his mask there, the Sensational Spider-Man. I love this figure, and I love the story behind it, because obviously Ben, he looks exactly like Peter Parker, but luckily this is comics where a pair of glasses can disguise your identity. So Ben thinks, you know what, I'm going to cut my hair different, I'm going to dye it blonde, and I'll be Peter Parker's cousin, Ben Reilly. And it works, and it works great. And we have this amazing comic run where Ben Reilly dons his own Spider-Man costume, which I think is probably, in my opinion, the best Spider-Man costume. It takes elements of the original and then just changes it and tweaks it and makes it a little bit more modern, and it just works beautifully. The outside the wrist web shooters are always going to be the coolest look. I love the outside web shooters. They just look great. Then he's got the fingers on the gloves with the webs, the half boots and the big spider on his chest. I just adore this figure. And speaking of which, this head, of course, is not the head that he came with. This blonde head came with the retro Scarlet Spider. And rightly, one of the friends of the show pointed out, and I, of course I knew this already, I mean, toss. This head doesn't actually work with the Scarlet Spider. He doesn't dye his hair blonde until he is in his Spider-Man official costume, so the chronology doesn't work. But that's okay. I kind of see it as like packing the Lilandra head in with... Was it Professor X who got the Lilandra head? It's like, yeah, it's not meant to go on him, but it's kind of part of an extra thing you can do. Because now this is recreating a Sensational Spider-Man comic book cover where he gets photographed taking his mask off. And yeah, I just adore it. But you know what did come with this figure? Haha! What came with this figure was the parts to make Spider Carnage, because Cletus Cassidy, he pops up a lot during the Clone Saga. So, first of all, we will show off one of my favorite kit bashes. I adore this. This is the Lex Luthor Justice League or Batman vs Superman body. So I took the head off, because obviously why do you want to get some DC mixed up in your Marvel Legends? And then we popped on the Cletus head. I got the tendrils from the original Carnage figure. I popped a Carnage hand on there as well. Looks so awesome. So Carnage menaces the Spider Brothers quite a bit during the Clone Saga. But in particular, there is one awesome story where the Carnage symbiote is seen to be attacking people, but Cletus Cassidy is still at Ravencroft, so... what's going on? I said, hey, what's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. The Carnage symbiote has been escaping from Ravencroft and attaching onto other people and just running amok as Carnage and then sneaking back later. So unfortunately, Ben Reilly is bonded with the Carnage symbiote, and we get the Spider Carnage story and the badass Spider Carnage figure. What a way to, double up the use of an action figure. The Ben Reilly Spider-Man gave us the Carnage head and the Carnage hands as well. And it translates into such an awesome way of getting a second character out of this. The head straight out of the Mark Bagley style comic book design. Again, love this. It would be nice to have the tendrils that were kind of on the legs and stuff, but you would need a different figure entirely for that. So as a way to kind of kit bash it and put it together, it just looks so great. And the story, particularly the third or fourth part, I think it's the third part, drawn by John Romita, so it looks very dark and gritty. It's when Ben has the Carnage symbiote bonded to him, and the symbiote is trying to convince him to murder Peter Parker so that there's no doubt as to who he is. And he's like, nope, I'm not gonna do it! But that was really, really cool. Speaking of Peter Parker, Peter and Mary Jane return to New York City because, you gotta have Peter. And I think by this point, the editorial team had decided, actually, yeah, you know what, we're gonna bring him back. And the main reason he came back was because of a skeleton. A Mortal Kombat skeleton, just for this use. It'd be nice if there was no blood on it, because they find another skeleton in the smokestack where Peter had dumped Ben. So if Ben climbed out of the smokestack, then who's the dead skeleton wearing a Spider-Man mask that they found there? Unless Ben wasn't the original clone. No, wait, it was Peter who was the original clone. But then if the dead clone did go in the smokestack and died and left the skeleton, then who's the Ben Reilly character that just... You know what? I'll settle this for you. I'll put you out of your misery. They don't know. And when I say they, I mean Marvel. They have no idea what they were going to do with this skeleton. They just threw it in to create confusion. And at the end, they just kind of went, yeah, it was nothing. Thanks for that, Marvel. So while Peter is back in New York, there are various adventures that Ben goes on just as Spider-Man. And there are a couple in particular that really stand out in my mind. One of my favorites brings back, again, menacing Ben Reilly, Carnage. But this is a fantastic mashup crossover because it's not just Carnage. It is Carnage and Mr. Sinister. It's an X-Men crossover with the Ben Reilly Spider-Man, and this actually came out years after the Clone Saga. It was like a flashback crossover. It was really great fun. Mr. Sinister is, of course, fascinated with genetics and cloning, so he finds Ben Reilly very interesting, and he wants to get some of the Carnage symbiote for his own studies. So Ben Reilly ends up teaming up with two very 90s looking X-Men. We get Bone Claw Wolverine and we have Black Costume Storm. This was the main reason why I wanted Black Costume Storm, because I was like, well, that's what she wears in the comic book, so of course I have to have it. And I'm so glad I do, because it looks absolutely fantastic. And then Bone Claw's Wolverine is just, he's the bomb. I love this guy. And it's great when they first meet Ben Reilly Spider-Man, instantly Wolverine's like, "You're not him, are you?" And that's really cool. Wolverine can instantly tell that Ben Reilly is not Peter Parker. I mean, they probably just use different deodorant, but that's a nice little sort of character trait. And by the end of the issue, of course, Sinister and Carnage are defeated. Actually, that's kind of a cool thing. I can't remember exactly, but I think that they defeat Sinister by... Sinister tries to read Ben Reilly's mind, and because he's a clone, and he's suffered so much and been through so much, it kind of short-circuits and frazzles Mr. Sinister's brain, and he's like, blah, I gotta get out of here. But he even gives like the snide remark of like, I know something you don't know, because obviously Sinister could tell that Reilly was a clone. So that was a great little aside and a good excuse to get some fun action figures out. And while we're talking about little stories that happened during the Ben Reilly period, there's another excuse for another custom figure, folks. I guarantee I must be the only human being in the world to own a figure of DK. Come on, man. DK. No, I don't blame you. DK is a character who appeared for one issue. He's like a eco-terrorist type person. Basically, you know, a horrible corporation, think like Roxxon or whatever, dumps a load of chemicals, and one guy, I think he tries to be a whistleblower. Either way, he ends up getting doused in chemicals and turns into what is basically Clayface from Batman. So he can turn into this monstrous, slobbery, mud muckman type form. But he can also revert himself back to being human too. So it's kind of a cool little power, and he has this corrosive DK. Get it? Forget it. He can decay things at the touch. And it was just a one issue story, but I thought, you know what? I want a custom figure because it's a Ben Reilly character. That's good enough for me. So we have a story with DK, and also we have a nice little aside where Ben Reilly, he's swinging around, he's being Spider-Man, he's doing his thing, but he obviously hasn't been around in New York for the last 5 years, so he doesn't know that the Sandman is at this point in time on the side of the Angels, former member of the Avengers, and also a former member of Silver Sable's Wild Pack, Silver Sablinova. You can see she's not holding the correct gun there because I dropped her gun down the back of my radiator, and that's gone forever now. That ain't coming back. But yeah, so it's funny. He sees Sandman kind of like lurking around the docks or whatever, and he instantly attacks him. And Sandman's like, dude, what the hell? And they have a bit of a fight, and then Silver Sable kind of shows up, and she's like, whoa, big misunderstanding here. And that was just a fun little sort of side story kind of illustrating how Ben has been out of the picture for a long time, and he's not used to being Spider-Man, and he's not up on what's going on exactly. Anyway, we're moving towards the end game. There are so many characters who appear in the Ben Reilly stories that don't have action figures that were kind of exclusive to Ben Reilly. Characters like Delilah or Armada or Jimmy Six. There were a lot of adventures that he had, but they can't all be represented. But there's one that just stands out for me because it's one of the rare instances where Peter and Ben team up when Ben is Spider-Man and Peter isn't. And this is another one where civilian Peter works fantastically because all of this Clone Saga stuff is happening during Onslaught. Oh my goodness, one of the biggest stories ever, and certainly the biggest story of the summer, and another reason why the Clone Saga continued for as long as it did, because they were going to wrap it up in the summertime, but editorial went, no, you can't, because we're doing Onslaught, so that's going to have to wait. So again, it gets stretched out even longer. But Onslaught is running amok in New York, basically. And while the Avengers and the X-Men and the Fantastic Four deal with that threat directly, it's up to... where on earth do I put them all? It's up to Ben Reilly Spider-Man and Peter Parker's head. That kit bash doesn't fit very well. Let me pop that back on. It's up to Ben Reilly and Peter Parker to battle an entire city full of Sentinels, because that was part of Onslaught's sort of crowd control plan. He hijacked all the Sentinels and made them kind of declare martial law in New York City. So there's a great couple of issues with Ben Reilly teaming up with Peter Parker to fight the Sentinels. And this is during a time where Peter's powers are kind of fading in and out and cutting off. So it was very tense because it's like, oh, they're holding out, but at any moment they could just fail him and he'll get squished. So that was a cool story. And guys, we're pretty much at the end now. There were lots of different things that happened during this time. Kane, for example, Kane comes back. He gets released from the pod that he was put in. He's healed up. He has a whole side story. But eventually we get to the end game. And I don't have the figures for a lot of these characters because it involves Gaunt, the Robot Master, Judas Traveler, all kinds of stuff. But eventually, finally, of course, as these things always do, it comes down to the Green Goblin. That was the final endgame piece. I'm looking for the Goblin Pumpkin Bomb. It's strewn somewhere here. The Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, is revealed as the mastermind behind this whole thing the whole time. The whole time? The whole time! Yes, Norman Osborn was the mastermind of the Clone Saga all along. And speaking of this whole time, we hadn't mentioned Mary Jane's pregnant. And she's about to pop. So in the Book of Revelations, the final chapter of the Clone Saga, Mary Jane goes into labor. Ben Reilly is assaulted and beaten and bloodied and battered and kidnapped, captured by Norman Osborn. So Ben Reilly is out of the picture and Peter Parker is left to face Norman Osborn one-on-one, mano a mano, one last time. And it is an epic story, issue, fight, tale. What happens is Peter and Norman Osborn are fighting. Osborn kind of lays out how he did this, why, just to torment Peter for all these years. And in the meantime, Ben has recovered and he is racing through the Daily Bugle collecting all these pumpkin bombs that Norman has distributed around there. That was his whole plan, was to blow up the Daily Bugle with all of Peter's friends and family inside. And eventually at the end, of course, we all know how this ends. Ben Reilly sacrifices his life to save Peter Parker. He jumps in front of the Goblin glider. It pierces him in the back and he falls off the roof to his death. And that is the end of Ben Reilly. I won't dwell on it because it's just too hard. But that's not the end of the story, because Mary Jane, who went into labor, you see that she went into labor because one of Norman Osborn's hench people slipped something in her food, and then the doctor took the baby and gave it to the Norman Osborn person, and she took it away, and the doctor was like, I'm sorry, we couldn't save the baby. And it's like, no, but you did the baby, no. And that was a plot angle that has never been resolved. So kind of, really, technically, sort of, there is a Peter Parker Mary Jane baby out there. Because, as a little side note, we see issues where Kane appears for just a panel or two and he's tracking down this person with this package. He's trying to chase after what Norman Osborn has taken, and they never explicitly say what it is. But eventually, it's dropped, so we never find out and they never get the baby back, and it's really quite a tragic ending.
Actually, I will admit that in hindsight, they kind of imply that the package that Norman Osborn is inquiring after is the kidnapped Aunt May. But that would involve me talking about the one who died being an actress, and we don't need to discuss that.
But one little thing that I always think with the Ben Reilly side of things, they brought Ben Reilly back and it was a clone and it was terrible and awful character assassination type stuff. But what I'm saying, just to wrap this up and put a little bow on it, is that Ben Reilly, the original Ben Reilly, the real Ben Reilly, is still out there somewhere. Why? Here's why. Because the Ben Reilly who died at the end of Peter Parker Spider-Man 75 turned into dust and disintegrated like all clones do. However, the whole point of Ben Reilly, which they stated all throughout the Clone Saga, was that Ben Reilly is the perfect identical clone of Peter Parker. He doesn't have degeneration. He doesn't have anything that would set him apart from the real Peter Parker. Therefore, I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that when Ben Reilly was kidnapped by Norman Osborn, Osborn put him on ice and brought out a clone of Ben Reilly with his memories, who then sacrificed himself and died at the end. Why would Osborn do this? Why would he do any of these things in the Clone Saga? To create confusion. It worked. But that's my hill that I will die on, is that Ben Reilly is still on ice somewhere, waiting to be resurrected and probably put back to prominence as the one true Spider-Man. Not going to happen, but a guy can dream. Either way, though, we're going to be getting Ben Reilly back in the Spider-Man comics very, very soon, and it seems like they are determined to make up for the disappointment of his original comeback. Will they succeed? Who knows? But guys, that brings us to the end of the Spider-Man Clone Saga. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a great time talking about it. So if there are any other comic book stories you want me to cover and tackle, get in touch. Let me know. And if I've got the action figures, I'll tell the story with them. In the meantime, though, guys, I want to give another shout out once again to Marvel Comics Crowns for this amazing pair of headwear. I'm getting better with the rhyming. Thank you so much. And if you want to get yourself a Marvel Comics Crown, go give them a follow at Instagram at Marvel Comics Crowns. And if you like what you see here and you want to see more, then join the 6-1 Clicks by clicking the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. And finally, if you really want to double down on showing some love for the channel, you can go to patreon.com/displaying model behavior. Throw a few shekels my way, and you can join the Hall of Champions. These icons among giants of people. I gotta work on a better spiel. These guys. You can join these guys as members of the Model Behavior Patreon, where you can see the occasional new random video and post and this and that. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, keep displaying model behavior.
Chill.
Whoa. Just where do you think you're going? Before you go anywhere, go and check out one of my older videos. I thought that it's kind of crazy that I've made literally hundreds and hundreds of videos, but I guess they kind of just get lost in the archives. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you a little recommendation. We were talking about Ben Reilly fighting Mr. Sinister, the X-Men fighting Carnage. Well, I did a full list countdown with action figures of the top 10 times that superheroes fought the wrong villain. And if I do the YouTube stuff correctly, you should be able to click on it right there. Did that work? Well, I guess we'll find out. Enjoy. I'm posing action figures every day. I'm posing action figures, it's okay.